This week in trading history.
Yes.
This one's even better for me, Patrick. I don't even need to say anything. You made me talk on that last one, but
no, you know what? I think you're going to pine in on this one. I'm sure.
The tulips. Okay, hit it. Let's see. Let's go.
All right. So this week in trading history. So we're going to go way back to the Tulip Mania in Holland, and it's generally considered the first recorded speculative bubble, which burst in the first week of February in 1637. And so we have to give this a little bit of context that everyone sort of has to step back and reflect on. So first of all, the Dutch were leading in financial innovation. So it was actually 35 years earlier in 1602 when the Dutch East India Company was incorporated, which we covered in one of these history sessions back in episode 20, the one with MH66, where it was never say never. So that means any of you that want to catch that one, just go back to our past episodes and listen to that one, because that's a great story, wasn't it, Kev?
For sure.
And so we want to think that the Dutch were leading in financial innovation. So they were first to create corporations, first to create a stock exchange. And through the 1600 to 1720s, the Dutch were had the highest per capita income in the world. And so they were actually very much during that period the center of the financial world, right? And so it's only appropriate that they created the infrastructure and cultivated one of the first recorded bubbles, right? It's
well, not only was it the first recorded bubble, it was probably the best one.
Well, we'll see.
No, really.
It's definitely interesting. But here's a second interesting fact which is very relevant today, which is that, to put this in perspective, the Tulip Mania craze from 1636 to 1637 occurred when the bubonic plague was ravaging the Dutch population, with regions of having 10% to as much as 33% of the population dying from the plague. And the bubble was going in the tulips while the bubonic plague was ravaging the Dutch population. Isn't that crazy?
Is that true?
That's true. Absolutely. The bubonic plague from 1635 to 1637. More importantly, literally the peak of the plague, interestingly, came within months of the peak of the Tulip Mania.
They were monetizing their balance sheet with tulips.
Or maybe there was a gambler mentality that was just running because their lifespan was like, I'm going to die anyway.
Right.
I might as well.
I'm not gonna be here next week, so I might as well
run with it, right? And so
these.
But I just thought it was really interesting. So the Tulip Mania, so we're going all the way back to 1637, right? But so the Tulip Mania was in the period of the Dutch Golden Age, during which contract prices for some of these bulbs were introduced, which were recently introduced as fashionable, reached extraordinary heights and then dramatically collapsed. The flowers were a symbol of status, which is like driving a Tesla today, right? No
resemblance at all.
No, nothing at all. It was particularly popular, actually, very much in France, and so a lot of the growers in Holland would actually be exporting these, which was something amongst most of Europe, that these flowers were very popular. A number of these flowers caught a virus called the mosaic virus, which caused rare coloration patterns to develop, which made those flowers far more desirable. And so one would think, well, you could just grow flowers. Why would they become so popular? There's no scarcity. But what's interesting about tulips is that they grow from bulbs, and which propagate through seeds and buds. And the seeds of a tulip take 7 to 12 years to form a bulb. And so
seriously,
yeah,
they
7 to 12 years. That long. And so the bulb grows into the flower, and the original bulb will disappear, but a clone bulb will form in its place with several new buds. So actually, properly cultivated, these buds can be formed into new flowers and new bulbs on their own. But the thing is, the mosaic virus spread only through the buds, not the seeds. So cultivating these not only took multiple years, but you can't actually use the seed from one of these flowers that actually caught this mosaic virus to create a new one. And so there was true scarcity. Like when one of these bulbs caught this virus, you couldn't replicate it. And it took years and years to do it. And so what you want to think to have with this bulb or this flower was a lot like today fine art or collectibles like exotic cars and things like this. It was incredibly rare and could not be reproduced. Right? And so it created that factor of scarcity that allowed a bubble to actually perpetuate. And so at the peak of the mania in 1637, one of these single bulbs traded 10 times the annual income of a skilled crafts worker. So imagine, let's say in today's perspective, let's say a skilled crafts worker makes $100,000 a year. So that means that one of these tulip bulbs would literally trade for $1 million.
Wow.
Well, and again, you say, wow, but somebody paid $130,000 for a banana taped to a wall with duct tape, right? So I guess it's all perspective, right? Anyway, but the thing is that there was a healthy market, and the process of trading these tulips developed amongst growers, which in this situation we'll kind of refer to them as commercial hedgers, right? Just the way farmers in the wheat market in the futures engage in the futures market. So there were these growers, and they were actually dealing with the bulbs themselves. But the speculation became rampant in 1636, a year before the peak, in the formal futures market developed in tulip bulbs. And so the trading congregated in numerous taverns, our type of traders, right, Kev?
Yes.
So
why wouldn't you trade in a tavern? Like
that makes so
awesome.
much sense, right?
Yeah.
And so these taverns were called colleges, and there were formal rules for bidding, like futures and payment and delivery. But because there were no formal ways, there was no regulators back then. There was no formal way to track margin. So there were many speculators that would be buying contracts with literally no collateral, knowing they had every intention to flip them before delivery. Yeah. So the actual speculation became rampant when they actually created the derivatives market for the actual tulip bulbs. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, derivatives are the source of all evil. Don't you know that?
Absolutely. And
as spoken as an ex-derivative institutional trader. That's
you go.
People,
So the timing of the collapse itself had no catalyst. And that's the interesting part is that it was just a parabolic rise that had a date with gravity, right? And after the collapse, there was a complete suspension of trading and settlement. But what's interesting is that you would think that this ravaged the population economically or something like this. But what was interesting is that in late April of 1637, many of the states of Holland decided not only to suspend this, but then gave permission for the sellers to sell the existing buds that they had that were originally under contract. They were able to actually go and actually sell them outside of the obligations. And so many of the states then followed the example of Haarlem, where the city council passed a regulation permitting buyers, the people who bought these contracts, to actually terminate them for 3.5% of the contract price penalty. So basically, many people were actually not bankrupted by this. There was like a 3.5% stop loss almost on these. Like a lot of people were left off the hook of the consequences of the bubble bursting.
That's bullshit. They turned futures into option contracts after the fact.
After the fact.
I'm calling bullshit on that.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so So it ended up becoming more of a socio-economic phenomenon than it was a significant economic crisis. In many ways, the Tulip Mania had no critical influence on the prosperity of the Dutch. And from the records, there was actually no real economic collapse that was associated with it. And so therefore, while it's a great story, it doesn't even come close to things like the Mississippi bubble, which we'll cover in the future weeks, and as well as we covered, obviously, East India Company and all of these others. These actually had huge economic impacts on the country when they collapsed. The Tulip Mania didn't actually have that. So I would equate it today like if the fine art market collapsed. It's like the economy would probably find a way to go on, and that really did actually end up playing that out that way. And so it's a great story of what happens when speculation goes rampant. And these tulips went nuts, the hundreds and hundreds of percent returns in very short order, and collapsed rapidly the other way. But it was not an economic collapse that came with it.
Well, it's good to know, Patrick. So we can have speculative bubbles that collapse without it crashing our economy. It's good to know. I was expecting you to tell the story about the fellow that mistakenly thought they were onions and ended up eating them, his boss's tulips, and it ended up being something worth like $5 or $10 million in today's dollars.
There was another. That was one of the stories, and there was another story where there was one of the tulips that actually came out black, and so it was an incredibly rare flower, like a black swan, almost like something. And these buyers came in. And they paid 1,500 florins to this guy to actually buy it. And they immediately threw it on the floor and stomped it to smithereens and destroyed it. And the guy was freaked out. Well, like, what the hell are you doing? He goes, well, we have a black one too. And if they find out that there's a second one, then you're going to destroy the value of ours from a rarity perspective. And so
shrewd traders, I like it.
So shrewd traders. So they went in there and they bought it and they destroyed it so that theirs was the only one.
Wow. And you know what? It coincided with February 3rd, the top of the market. The market gods were telling you, they were sending signals. Anyways, that's a great story, Patrick. Thanks for sharing that with us.